Story 3. The Screaming Man in the Morgue.
This is another story my grandpa told me about 10 years ago, and I still remember it like it was yesterday. My grandpa used to work as a janitor at an old hospital back in the 70s. It was one of those places where the walls seemed to hold on to the pain and sorrow of everyone who had ever passed through. The kind of place where the lights flickered even when the wiring was fine, where footsteps echoed in empty hallways, and where you always felt like someone or something was watching you. But there was one part of that hospital that even the bravest staff avoided whenever they could. The morgue. My grandpa said, "Boy, if you ever end up working in a hospital, stay away from the morgue at night." And then he told me this story. It happened during a cold winter night. The hospital was quiet, too quiet. Only a skeleton crew was working. The night nurse and orderly, and my grandpa, mopping the floors down by the emergency ward. He said there was always a strange feeling after midnight. But that night, it felt more heavier, like the air was thick. Around 2 a.m. the call came in. A man was brought in. Doorway. No one knew exactly what had happened. The paramedics said they found him slumped in an alley downtown. No signs of trauma, no visible injuries. Just dead, but there was something about his face. A look of sheer terror. His eyes wide open, mouth frozen mid-scream. They wheeled him down to the morgue and left him there until the coroner could come in the morning. Standard procedure. But that's when things started getting weird. My grandpa was finishing up his shift when he heard it. A scream. Faint at first. But it echoed down the cold, empty hallways. He stopped mopping, thinking maybe one of the nurses needed help. But as he listened, the scream got louder. It wasn't just a scream. It was a man's scream. Agonized. Terrified. And it was coming. From the morgue, my grandpa swore he felt his blood turn cold. But being the kind of man he was, he had to check. He grabbed his flashlight and walked down that long corridor toward the morgue. Each step I took, he said, the screaming got louder. When he reached the door, it was ice cold to the touch. He hesitated, but something, curiosity or maybe a sense of duty, made him push the door open. The morgue was pitch black except for the dim light flickering from a corner. And then, silence. The screaming had stopped. My grandpa swept his flashlight across the room. All the metal drawers were closed. The room was freezing. And yet, he could feel something in the air. A presence. It was like, "I wasn't alone," he whispered. He stepped closer to the cold metal slabs where the bodies were kept. And then, bang, 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 pounding, coming from one of the drawers. My grandpa's heart was pounding in his chest. He wanted to run, but his feet felt glued to the floor. Bang, bang, the pounding got louder, more frantic, and then, a muffled scream. "Help me! Let me out! Please!" My grandpa said his blood ran cold, but there was no mistaking it. It was the same man they had brought in earlier, the one who was already declared dead. "I know what I heard," my grandpa told me. That man was screaming, begging to be let out. He gathered whatever courage he had left, took a few steps forward, and slowly opened the drawer. Empty. The slab was cold. No body. Nothing. But here's the thing. The toe tag was still there, lying on the metal. It had his name, his information, and a timestamp confirming his death. But the man, gone. My grandpa said he didn't tell anyone that night. Who would have believed him? But the next day, when the coroner arrived, the body was back. Same face, same position, same frozen scream. The coroner chalked it up to a mix-up. Said maybe someone had moved the body by mistake. But my grandpa? I know what I saw. And I know what I heard. For weeks after that night, strange things kept happening in the morgue. Lights would flicker, footsteps echoed when no one was there. And sometimes, staff swore they heard faint screaming coming from the cold metal drawers. Boy, my grandpa told me, if you ever hear a scream coming from a morgue, don't you dare open that door. Some souls, they just don't stay dead. And I believe him. Even now, just thinking about it makes my skin crawl.
The Haunted Room 502, Waverly Hills Sanatorium.
This is a story my grandpa told me about 10 years ago. And even now, I can't shake it off. Waverly Hills Sanatorium, a place where hope turned into horror. Back in the early 1900s, tuberculosis, or the White Plague, swept through Kentucky like wildfire. Thousands were sent to Waverly in hopes of a cure, but for many, it became their final resting place. But among all the ghostly tales that echo through those abandoned hallways, Room 502, that's the one that still sends chills down my spine. My grandpa used to say, boy, if you ever find yourself near Waverly, never go near Room 502. Not if you value your life. He told me about a nurse who worked there in the 1920s, a young woman who was kind and caring, but burdened with a terrible secret. She had become pregnant out of wedlock, a shame too heavy to bear back then. Alone, terrified, and with no way out, she took her own life. They found her hanging from a light fixture in Room 502, but death didn't bring her peace. Not long after that tragedy, strange things started happening in that room. Nurses would report hearing whispers when no one was there. Cold spots would send shivers down their spines, even in the heat of summer. And then, it happened again. Another nurse, different time, but same room. This one, they say, jumped from the window of Room 502. Some claim she was driven mad by the whispers, the shadows, the unseen force that lingered in that room. Others believe something pushed her, but here's where it gets really unsettling. Visitors who dare to step inside Room 502 have reported the same things over and over again. A heavy feeling, like the air is pressing down on your chest. Some have seen the figure of a woman standing by the window where the second nurse met her end. They say she looks out, as if waiting for someone or something. And if you stay there long enough, you'll hear it. A faint whisper, sometimes calling your name, sometimes just pleading. My grandpa said that even the bravest ghost hunters avoid that room. They know that whatever haunts Room 502, it's not something you want to mess with. Boy, he'd tell me, looking me dead in the eye, if you ever hear a voice calling from that room, don't you dare answer. And you know what? After hearing that story, I don't think I ever will. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is a chilling real-life experience shared by one of our subscribers, Kat. This story takes place in a psych ward, where what started as a normal night turned into something truly horrifying. This is Kat's story, in her own words.
It all started when I was in a psych ward. It was nighttime, and each room had 5 beds, but only 3 of them were occupied, including mine. The other 2 beds were empty. I was talking with the 2 other girls in my room, who we'll call Emma and Carla for privacy reasons. Since we weren't tired, we stayed up talking late into the night. Usually, the staff would come in and tell us to quiet down, but we didn't care. A few minutes later, a girl walked into our room wearing a hospital gown. At first, we were excited because she seemed like a nice young girl who was probably scared. She placed her things on her bed, and Emma, being the kind-hearted girl she is, started talking to her, trying to make her feel comfortable. I like this new girl too. Let's call her Maggie. As we continued talking, everything seemed fine until Maggie suddenly started getting angry. She asked us to give her a minute, walked over to the drawer where my stuff was kept, moved my things aside, and climbed on top of the cabinet. Then she closed her eyes, as if she was praying or doing yoga. We ignored it and decided to call it a night. Before we went to sleep, I asked Carla to tell Maggie what happens when she sleeps. Carla had trauma that made her moan in her sleep. And on my first night in the ward, it freaked me out because I wasn't expecting it. Carla explained it to Maggie, and that's when things got strange. Maggie gave her a bright smile that sent chills down my spine and said, "Oh, that's not your trauma. That's your demons. I can see spirits all over this room, and they're all around you." Carla and Emma immediately looked at me, clearly uncomfortable. I was furious because I found her comment disrespectful, but I decided to ignore it and went to my bed. For context, my bed was in the corner of the room. Emma's bed was near the entrance next to Maggie's, and Carla's bed was also in the corner next to mine. We could all see each other easily while lying down. Maggie then asked if she could pray for Carla. And Carla, being the sweet person she is, agreed. Maggie started mumbling prayers over Carla. I didn't mind at first. I believe in God. But the way she mistook trauma for demons made me uneasy. I was wearing a black sweater that night. And after finishing her prayer, Maggie looked directly at me, smiled, and said, "There's a black figure with you too." I was pissed, but I pretended not to care. I wasn't scared because I believed in God, so I ignored it. Emma, being too nice, didn't say anything, but I could tell she was also uneasy. Then things escalated. Maggie suddenly started stuttering, which seemed to frustrate her. Her face turned red, and she grabbed a cup and spat inside it. She looked at Carla and told her to come over. Carla, too scared to refuse, walked over and looked inside the cup. Her expression was pure disgust. It was filled with her saliva. Maggie smiled and said, "These are your demons." Then she walked out of the room without asking the staff, which was against the rules, but it was clear. She didn't care. That night, I noticed Carla's moaning was much louder than usual. I couldn't sleep. I was scared that Maggie was watching us. I stayed up all night, pretending to be asleep. At one point, I saw Maggie walk over to Carla's bed and stand over her. She started mumbling something, while Carla, still asleep, became louder, grunting in her sleep. Then Maggie started walking toward my bed. I panicked and sat up. She noticed I was awake, got startled, and walked out of the room. The next day during lunchtime, everyone was talking about how weird Maggie was. The other girls told me, Carla and Emma, how brave we were for sleeping in the same room with her. I admit I felt bad. After all, this was a mental hospital. But Maggie was too much. She would even call the nurses the N-word, and she wasn't even black. Things got worse when Carla was showering one time, and Emma was on the phone with her girlfriend, leaving me alone with Maggie. I was terrified. Maggie left the room, and I nervously walked toward the door. Another girl from a different room was standing there too. She asked why I looked so anxious, and I told her to be careful. I forgot to mention this. The night before, Maggie had said she wanted to stab Sasha, the girl standing outside the door. When I told Sasha, she got angry and yelled, "Well, if she wants to stab me, let her." Seconds later, Maggie appeared and started screaming so loud that the entire hospital went silent. She screamed, "I thought we were good," at the top of her lungs. The nurses came running, and Maggie went crazy. She tried to jump on Sasha, and it took 7 nurses to hold her down. She was almost about to go into code blue, but they managed to inject her with a sedative, what we called booty juice. It knocked her out. Carla came running from the showers, asking if I was okay. She said she had heard the screaming, even from the other side of the ward. Emma came to check on me too. I was terrified after witnessing that. I just wanted to go home. That night, we were in the day room drawing, listening to music and coloring. Then Maggie walked in, looking pale. They had booty juiced her multiple times, but she was still moving around. She started dancing and chanting things none of us could understand. Emma, Carla, and I were terrified to go back to our room. We begged the staff to move her, but they didn't listen. Little did they know, they were making a big mistake. Later that evening, Carla went to the phones to make a call, leaving me and Emma alone. Maggie eventually came back and offered to pray for Carla again. But this time, Carla refused. She didn't feel like it helped. Maggie seemed annoyed and walked out. Carla looked at me and laughed. "That girl is crazy." But within minutes, we heard Maggie screaming again. Emma walked toward the door and saw the nurses trying to restrain her. Then, to our horror, Maggie ran back into the room, screaming, throwing her things, and the nurses locked us in the room with her, shutting off the lights. The room went completely dark. I panicked. I saw Carla frozen in fear, Emma too scared to move, and Maggie losing control. Emma banged on the door, pleading with the staff to let us out. Maggie screamed and cried, and we were all terrified. Eventually, the staff opened the door. A nurse warned Maggie that if she didn't calm down, they'd have to booty juice her again. That finally shut her up. The next day, it was almost time for me to leave. Maggie was screaming again in the halls. I was so done with her. After I left, a few weeks later, Carla and Emma texted me. We had exchanged numbers because we became so close, protecting each other in that place. They told me that Maggie was released early. I don't know how they let her out, but I'm just glad I never have to see her again. But I'll never forget the way she stared down at Carla, mumbling words in the dark, and then trying to come over to my bed.
Thank you, Kat, for sharing this terrifying story with us. If you have a chilling experience you'd like to share, drop it in the comments or send me an email. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more spine-tingling content.